Day 8 of the August 99 10-day retreat in Springwater. Sound of motor, thought saying it's probably a lawnmower, and can it end there without like or dislike? Cicadas in the ears, right here. A movement, a cracking chair, a cough. Breathing, is it here? Not the thought of breathing, not the words. Wordlessly. And whatever else is here, no need to name it all, it's all here, all the sensations, sounds, feelings. Someone said, I need to focus attention on this one or that one sensation or sound, sensation. Can't pay attention to them all. But they're all here. Here, right here. And one may discover to one's astonishment that if thought ceases naming, liking and disliking, categorizing, if that is in abeyance, everything in fact is here at the same time, which is no time. No time to go from this to that. That takes time for thought. To move from here to there. And if that is quiet, as it does happen, right now, it's all here. Last night in the group, the first question was, you've talked about anger and fear. Can we look at jealousy and envy? Bear with us if you feel this is not what you're interested in. Bear with it. We'll make it interesting for all of us. I remember I have a tape at home. Krishnamurti talking to Iris Murdoch. Interview was arranged for him. And she wanted at one point, I only saw it once, so the memory is not very good. She wanted to talk about jealousy. Because it's such a powerful movement in human beings. Each one is familiar with it. And at one point he said, look at it as you would look at a precious jewel in your hand. And she said, I could hardly think of jealousy as a precious jewel. That's what I remember. I don't remember his answer, but we don't have to remember his answer. It is, the looking is the precious jewel, not what it is that is looked at. That doesn't matter. It's either this or that or nothing. Ka, ka, ka. So, I wondered how the group would respond to this, and it filled the whole hour, looking at it in all kinds of ways. This whole movement, and it doesn't matter whether it's jealousy, fear, envy. Each one has their particular differences. And yet, can the looking be the same? The probing, the wondering, the observing, without, and that was brought up very quickly, without judging it, or not wanting to look at this thing. It's too ugly. It does not conform to my image of myself. And these movements are very quick and very subtle. They need quick and subtle attention to be detected. Not wanting to look at something that stirs in this human mind and body, like jealousy or envy. And to grasp it in its depth. Of course, the person who brought it up, she's a teacher, and saying these grades one gives to children immediately cause comparison. That's what grades are there for, aren't they? To differentiate you in your accomplishments from you, in your not so accomplishments. And inevitable comparison, envy, jealousy, or dejection. We've all gone through it. Maybe since day one, when our parents compared us either to another sibling or the child they would have wanted, or happiness with this child, and what will it become? What will it be? So, comparison and push to be, to achieve, the desire in the parents transmitting themselves to the child. Inevitably, that imprints what I am, what I should be, what I'm not, and brings out these emotions of jealousy or envy, triggers them. They are in the human air. We infect each other with them, whether we want it or not. I remember very early talking with Kyle that if Ralph starts bringing grades, good ones or bad ones, we're not going to care, not going to worry, we're not going to burden this child. But there's something in you that is disappointed when an F comes home. And you may not say it, but he picks it up. You're very poor in hiding in front of children your emotions, maybe even in front of each other. One can see such fine, minute, muscular gestures in the face, interpret them immediately, maybe wrong, maybe right. See, one person asked, that was linked with the initial question, is it possible to transmute these feelings of jealousy and envy into rejoicing with the other people's abilities and looks? It's a wonderful ideal, isn't it? to do that. And we're also imbued with those ideals. Don't be jealous, wish other people well. Don't be envious. Be happy that somebody else has something that you don't have. These are all such way out idealizations away from watching what is really happening in us. And to begin freshly every time to face these emotions, these movements of the mind with all their scenarios that are brought up, wishing someone else not well, on the contrary. And this case, of course, was brought up very quickly. What if your husband chooses a lover? Your girlfriend leaves you for another. And these emotions of jealousy, in losing what we think or have thought we possessed and have become attached to, they are so deep, they go way into the animal kingdom. We say the animal kingdom. The holding on to the possession of mates, territory, uncompromisingly, except that animals usually settle it with less than atom bombs. So not to imagine and wish one could not have these feelings, therefore not look at them and dwell in how one should be like. This is not healthy. And feelings suppressed in this way come out the back door, usually in a more distorted way. And we were also talking about how taking commandments, taking precepts, may not at all be helpful to illuminate how we really are. It sort of pressures and pulls us toward how we should be. If we were better than we are, which we could be if we only followed the precepts. I remember really being shocked at hearing this precept in a Buddhist place of vowing not to become angry. How can one vow that? And what does it do to the body-mind? And then when it was my duty as a teacher there to have jukai, where you gave the precepts, beginning to look at many different precepts from many different Buddhist centers and amazed how different they were. How different way they were expressed, particularly the precept about sexual activity. Expressed sternly in one place, very leniently in another. So, the only thing I could do with it is to say, does the taking of these precepts begin to shed some helpful light on the way we are? Having vowed this and this and this, can we observe how it really is and use the precepts in this way? Rather than setting up this stress and strain to become something that at this moment we are not, and that we refuse to observe because we've taken the precepts. Also mentioned by several different participants was how mindfulness training as a practice can overlay looking at what really goes on. Not the mindfulness of attentiveness, watchfulness that we're talking about here. Examining, trying to fearlessly look at something. Fearless meaning watching the resistance and letting it melt away in the looking, so that the view has been cleared. And not overlay this process of examining ourselves or of revealing ourselves to ourselves, not overlay this process with a practice of whatever. I never had this particular mindfulness practice, but several people had experience with it, and also the experience that it became a blanket rather than an eye-opener, a mind opener. That's what needs to happen. So, why does jealousy and envy arise? Since right now we're talking about these two movements of the conditioned, self-enclosed human body-mind. And is it possible that they may not arise, not because of controlling through precepts, through willpower, through hanging on to imagery? None of that. Not judging it, right or wrong, good or bad. Suppressing it, repressing it. And we can ask ourselves this question without needing to answer it. But it can be stated from direct experience. That if I, as I know myself in my conditioned ways, am absent, not here, then everyone and everything, beautiful and ugly, talented, gifted, or not so, is as it is, and it is oneself, not oneself in the personality sense, in the sense of wholeness, completeness, of everything that's here together. I don't mean just in this hall. And if that takes place, doesn't matter for how long, the absence of oneself in its conditioned movements, the quieting of that, not forcefully quiet, absent, not intruding. Then why would there be jealousy or envy or comparison? Everything is as it is. Seen as one may look at beautiful jewels. Not there isn't the ugly, the violent, the distorted, the sick. It's there. But the looking is wholesome, not comparative, which happens when thought brings me, as I know myself, into the picture, which fragments the picture immediately. I have to say something here right now. We talked about this in another meeting. In trying to solve a problem which affects us here, or a group of people working together, or wherever, trying to look at the problem and try to come up with a solution. Oneself with one's needs is part of that situation. One need not disappear. One person said, I don't disappear when I look at something wholesomely. Oneself is just one of the ingredients of this whole meal. I don't know whether that's the best analogy. The situation. Not overweighing, not underweighing, because it needs to be in our practical negotiations with each other. It calls for a realism, not an idealism of maybe sacrificing oneself and then resentment creeping in. Because one doesn't get one's just due like the others do. And this whole thing is at work of comparing, and they're getting more than I do. So to be very realistic, straightforward with what oneself requires in the light of the whole situation. But before I was talking meditatively, the emptiness of oneself, which embraces and permeates everyone and everything equally. So, jealousy arises when it dwells in this conditioned realm of me and mine, my territory, my possessions, and jealousy arises. Can it illuminate somewhat this realm? The looking at it, the perceiving it, and not just furtively. And brain is so ready and quick to provide all kinds of rationalizations why I'm right. Justifications. I have a right to feel this way. Not just to go with this. If we want to find out more about ourselves, know ourselves as we are, not to justify it immediately. That closes up the inquiry. To see the justification in itself and wonder about it, not just believe in it. Move with it. Sort of to hold still. That's meditation. And as many of us find out all the time, this is not very easy in our daily, quick reacting ways in which, as I said earlier, we infect each other. With our selfish movements of mind and body. That's why it's so good to have a place to come to where all of this stuff can be aired out and lit up, looked at like a precious jewel in one's hand. To have the time and space, minimum pressure from the outside, the pressure then comes from the inside, and one realizes it's not the outside that pressures me. Ultimately, it's the thoughts and habits and programs that are so powerful. And as one person mentioned this morning, sometimes if there is an option of going with one more moment of being attentive or going with a habit, no matter how painful it is, the movement is with a habit. It seems, 'It seems more safe. 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 'It see more at ease, less effort. Habit has that quality of seemingly comforting us, even if it's a painful habit, rather than giving one more bit of attention to this, which the person said is tremendously hard work for me. And it is. Unless it's effortless, it is effort. That's a fact. And the effortlessness cannot be conjured up by effort. I don't know whether it was this way how we came to talk a bit about trust. It was toward the end of the meeting, when I spoke of my amazement at having become a trusting person as far as this work is concerned here. Meditative work, either meditative inquiry or meditative presence, which may not need inquiry because there's nothing to inquire into. There's complete, total trust in this. In a person who grew up in an environment which instilled anything but trust, fear, suspicion, apprehension, distrust. But this is totally trustworthy. This and only this. And if we're both in this, truly working in this, then we can trust each other. We cannot trust movements of the ego. They are not trustworthy. They are very fickle. Here today, there tomorrow. Changing as the weather. And it was neat, one person saying, as you say this, I feel some envy. I also want this trust. I don't have it. So how do we look at this envy as it arises without going with it and letting it expand into a story about myself and you? That's the secret. Something arises, to see it and watch that it does not, what's the word? Wuchern is the German word. Weed into a story. Because then we are caught up in an ever-expanding and embellished story about me and you, which is not what is the fact. To remain with that, the fact of jealousy arising, the feeling of it, and be cautious about getting caught up in the headlines about it. That there's a shift of energy from habit to presence. We can play with this. It is an amazingly interesting thing. Coming sort of, as it were, to a fork in the road, either go with the habit of what I want, trying to get it, going for it, or, remaining attentive, not fighting the habit, not condemning it, or condoning it, neither. Just stop, look, and listen. And for a moment it seems like losing something or be withdrawing from the momentum of this energy to get what we want, often just in fantasy, the pleasure, or the release of anger, or jealousy, or envy. To appreciate, by facing it directly, the tremendous power to go with habit, and not going with it out of, it's not willpower, it's not force, it's this unfathomable energy of attending, bewaring and awaring. And this withdrawal symptom does not last long if there can be remaining with attention. It comes and goes, not to be seduced by it or affected by it. Again, this is something which may happen easier in retreat, where all kinds of attention energy gathers. All kinds, I mean, many people coming together. And there may, in fact, be a pooling of communal energy. That's what every spiritual center talks about, this creation of common energy. But I wouldn't just take it over lock, stock, and barrel. Find out whether it is so. Because one can create all kinds of inspirational energy by the thought that we have this here. I remember it used to be became a real habit at the Zen Center. People who hadn't been in the retreat and picked up their relatives or friends said, "Boy, you guys really disturbed my sleep with your energy." Maybe it's so. Maybe it's an idea. Because we should be constantly disturbed, because nowadays there are retreats going on everywhere all the time. How could we ever sleep? No, it has to be my retreat. My folks'. So, to come back to another question that was asked before the break. By someone who hasn't done this kind of thing before, yet is interested in it. And the question was, why sit? What is meditation? Could you speak about it? And that question came about 10 minutes to 9. I said, I'm too tired to talk about it right now. Although a few words popped out anyways, because if somebody is interested, it's a very amazing phenomenon. Somebody who's truly interested, it's sort of like priming a pump. And the water starts flowing. Whereas if somebody asks the same question but is not interested, it's sort of a formal, polite question. The water does not flow. Not by any conscious decision. It happens this way. So, why sit? Has it become a habit to those of us who've done tremendous hours of sitting? Some people come to this now 20 years, 30 years. A sort of repetitive thing. I don't think so. We talk too much about this. This kind of thing gets shattered. But you have to ultimately, not just ultimately, firstly, find out for yourself. But you can only find out for yourself if you do it. Not speculate it and ask lots of people and read lots of publications about it. You have to find out what it is about sitting down quietly. Quietly meaning not thrashing about and in a relatively quiet environment, which you may not have at home. And not give up if it doesn't seem to bring any results, if all you find is you're more in touch, you have never had so many thoughts as now you feel, which isn't really true. It's that you're more aware of all the thoughts that are there, always. Not to give up. If you experiment with this, you have to give it some time, because today's sitting is not like tomorrow's or next year's. I remember people despairing ever being able to sit with a quiet mind. They may be very intellectually engaged. It's maybe their profession, their love. To think, to write. And, wonder of wonders, it is possible for any mind to quiet down, given the patience, the endurance with it. And by endurance, I don't mean this conventional pushing or being pushed. Just sitting with what comes up, the boredom, the numbness. Somebody says, I don't feel anything but numbness. Well, you're feeling that. There is some feeling, some presence. Else you couldn't talk about numbness. There's something that goes on for a human being when one enters into silence. Silence of body-mind. Because the movements that we engage in often help to distract or to get away from something that was just coming up painfully. We begin to shift attention or shift the body around. And that's why it's quite helpful to not shift the body around, so some of the stuff which is habitually avoided through nervous motions comes into view. And then to say hello to it and not go away. Because there's nothing that comes up in a human being that is not worthy to be looked at superficially and profoundly. Also, in sitting in silence, and it's all right to move to a better posture. There's nothing wrong with that. Sitting in silence, the body which has been so brutalized by stimulation, hecticness, overwork. Once it gets through this period of withdrawal, which I call withdrawal, wanting stimulation which isn't forthcoming, and of course the fantasy providing it, but it's still not the same as our daily overstimulated, overactive, overburdened life, staying awake all hours of the night with artificial light. Once we get through this withdrawal period, and be patient, don't give it a certain amount of days or hours or months or years, you don't know, to let go of these conditions. Just be with it. And out of that emerges a heightened sensitivity to what is there, the fineness of it, the subtleness. Which this marvelous organism is capable of. Touching, sensing, awareing. Although awareness is not just a function of the brain. The brain needs to be quietly open. And then awareness happens. And it does quiet down, given patience and endurance. And then in quietness, things can be seen much more clearly. In this beautiful environment, the trees and water and birds and meadow flowers and dry rotting leaves on the woods floors, so much more clearly heard and seen and beheld. But also what goes on in ourselves becomes luminously transparent, to be seen and understood in new ways that are free of condemning or condoning. Am I painting idealistic pictures that one wants to have? Watch it. And stay here with what is here. The envy that may come up, and see it and don't go with it. It's not worth it. As one finds out for oneself in watching it time and time and time and time and time again. And something happens. Things that seem so important fade in their importance on their own through this seeing and understanding and consequences beheld with amazement. So what is meditation? That was the second part of that question. By now it was 5 minutes to 9. You see, memory can operate and not disturb the space of looking, the silent space of looking. So not to have notions about the goodness or badness of memory. We can talk about that some other time. What is meditation? Recently, I have said it has twofold aspects. One is the coming in touch in a new way with this conditioned being that we all manifest. We haven't chosen it. It's here. It's happened to all of us. Conditioned in anger and fear and jealousy and envy and wanting and fearing and pleasuring and rejoicing. To come in fresh contact with that. Learn about it in depth, not psychoanalytically, but immediately as it arises, or whenever it can be evoked as a memory if at the moment one was totally oblivious and went with it. To watch it and learn about it so that we become very intimate with how we are constituted as psychological beings. Tremendous burdens. Tremendous burdens. Being capable, because of delusive ideas in the brain, to go into schools or offices and mow down people with automatic rifles. I'm always surprised how everybody who is then consulted on the news says, we don't understand this. We're at a loss of understanding why somebody could do this, and then sort of digging in the past of these people. It's so clear, isn't it? What a deluded brain, the power of it, the power of believing this is true what the brain projects and acting on that illusion. One can observe it in smaller ways in oneself, less grave. So, to really be imbued with the significance of this, understanding our conditioning and how the brain can be deluded with pictures, images, ideas, racial, religious, political, you name it, and act on those ideas, believing one is doing the right thing, one is helping humanity. When one sees that, one understands the importance, the significance of awareing these processes in oneself and in each other in a new way. But that's not the whole of meditation. The other aspect is this in-touchness with what is not conditioned, which is free and open and full of spontaneous love and compassion and wisdom, unself-consciously. With motors humming and cicadas chirping and simple breathing. We will end here for today.